Brought to you by 1AAuto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Okay, this is part 3 of replacing the timing belt in this 2002 Toyota Tundra. This is basically reassembling the front of the engine, putting the radiator and everything back in and filling it with coolant and making sure it's good to go. And a brief look at the tools you'll need, and also in the beginning of the video you'll see how I make a tool to hold the harmonic balancer so you can tighten the bolt. We had left off part 2, had put the harmonic balancer pulley back on with the bolt, cranked the crankshaft around twice, which turned the camshafts once, and made sure that when the timing belt was at the 0, back at 0 top dead center, that the alignment marks for the camshaft pulleys were lining up as well. So now we'll head into torquing the harmonic balancer bolt. And here is my special tool. It's 2x4, just over 2 feet long, with a large hole and 2 smaller holes. And I'm going to bolt it in and show you how it works. Okay, now you can see what I've done is I've taken my harmonic balancer puller bolts and bolted the 2x4 to the harmonic balancer. This nice big hole is where I'm going to access the bolt with an extension. I've got a couple washers on here. You want to make sure that the bolts go through and hold enough and are tight, pulling the board tight against the pulley here, but also that they're not coming through the back side and interfering. Okay, and then the board will hold itself against the frame there.
Okay, 2 quick notes. The bolts I use to bolt the 2x4 on are the bolts from the harmonic balancer puller. And the other note is you can see that my timing mark is now way beyond the 0 degree. You do need to turn your balancer so that the 2x4 can be bolted on there. There are some items at the bottom that will interfere with it, so you have to have it in this position in order to bolt the board on there.
Put my torque wrench in there. Okay, now we just unbolt that and we're all set.
And on this vehicle, that bolt should be torqued to 181 foot-pounds.
Okay, now your belt tensioner needs to go back on here. Now the belt tensioner goes back on.
Okay, so as I'm tightening these bolts for the tensioner, basically a note for all the bolts on the front end of the motor, if it's a 10 millimeter, you want to tighten it between 10 and 12 foot-pounds. 12 millimeter bolts, you want to tighten between 15 and 20 foot-pounds, and 14 millimeter bolts between 25 and 30 foot-pounds. Here I lift up the alternator and slide it onto the stud at the front of the engine. Start the bolt down below and then start the nut on the top of the alternator. And now tighten that nut and the bolt holding the alternator up with a 14 millimeter socket and ratchet.
Let's put our false water pump bracket back in place here. Make sure the wiring stays out of the way.
Okay, just a little close-up. There's a large 14 millimeter bolt that goes in down low right there as I kind of tighten it by hand. A 14 millimeter nut goes on right there, and then there's a 12 millimeter nut and a 12 millimeter bolt that goes in down low. You do leave a hole open that's right near the center of the engine, right between the pump and the serpentine belt tensioner. And speed it up as we tighten up those fasteners. 2 reminders again, you're going to leave one hole seemingly open. It gets filled with a bolt when we put on the front cover, and then also be careful not to pinch any wiring in behind this part, especially down lower. Now reach down, pull the power steering pump back up, and put it onto the stud that comes out of the front of the engine. Kind of pull it up and it'll slide on. And again, you can easily access the nut and two bolts just by turning the pulley and reaching through the holes, and then tighten them up once again right around 30 foot-pounds. Now we'll put the center plastic cover on. Two long 12mm bolts. These bolts do help hold the water pump in, so you want to make sure that you torque them to 17 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're going to put the right hand or passenger side timing chain cover on. There is a little tab down on the lower part that goes underneath the center cover. Make sure that tab goes in, and then make sure that it goes onto the stud that protrudes out from the engine, and then put the 3 bolts and the nut on and tighten them lightly, about 7 to 10 or 12 foot-pounds, just firm, not extremely tight. Okay, now you feed that left hand or driver's side cover in from the top underneath the large set of wires, and then feed the crank sensor wire through. Again, this one has a little tab down at the bottom, so make sure that's underneath the false water pump. Then I'm starting the bolts using my wrench to kind of hand tighten them, and then again tighten them firm, not too tight. And now here I can take the wire, pull it up, put the grommet on, make sure the grommet's nice and firm, and reconnect the wire and put the wiring harnesses all back into their little clips that hold them in place. Here on the rectangular opening, I have a little bit of sealant on there. You can use either some gasket sealant or RTV. I also have some sealant on the manifold itself. And make sure, there's another thing, I have some oil around the O-ring just to make sure it slides in nicely, and also make sure the O-ring is not twisted at all. And put the bolts in and feed it in, get the bolts going, and then tighten the bolts uniformly so that it presses straight in. And like the other water pump bolts, these bolts should be tightened 17 to 20 foot-pounds. Here I'm installing the oil cooler tube, the one that runs from the top to bottom. One tip, put it on to the fittings, and then also get the nut and bolt that hold the brackets, get those started before you put the clamps on. Okay, remember there's 3 clamps. There's 2 at the top, and then 1 down low at the bottom. And again, tighten up the 10mm nut and the 10mm bolt down lower that hold this to the front of the engine. Here I'm putting on the idler pulley and the tensioner pulley. Just a note, you didn't really even have to remove the tensioner pulley, but I did just because I was kind of following a way I remembered to do it on a different vehicle. But put these on and then tighten them up to anywhere between 25 and 30 foot-pounds. Okay, now lift the AC compressor back in place, and obviously we're up underneath the vehicle now. Start the rear bolt first, then I start the long bolt in front, tighten those 2 up, and then I do the top one from the top. Okay, now I'm going to put that reinforcement bracket back in there, and tip here, put the 12mm bolt in and start it first, and then start the 12mm nut afterwards, and then tighten them up. Okay, so unfortunately I didn't get a good shot of it here, but obviously you need to tighten the top bolt up, and then there's a little bracket that screws down onto the top of the AC compressor. Put that Phillips screw in and tighten it, and then make sure you reconnect your AC compressor. Okay, now here we're going to put the fan pulley back on, and then put the fan back on and start the 4 nuts that hold it in place.
Okay, and as far as retightening the fan, holding it with your hand and tightening is enough to get it going. And then what I suggest is a rubber door stop. You can stick it down between the crank pulley and the fan pulley, and that hold it in place. And you don't need to get it extremely tight. These bolts should be between 15 and 16 foot-pounds. Okay, here's our belt routing diagram. Always very useful. Okay, now we're just going to route the belt like the diagram tells us, which is basically put a loop down around the crankshaft, up and around the water pump, around the AC compressor, across over the idler pulley. Actually, you leave it off the idler pulley at first, over around the power steering pump, alternator, and up towards the tensioner. Okay, not sure how well you can see. My belt's routed on everything except basically the tensioner and the eyelet pulley. So I'm going to take the tensioner, pull it down, get the belt correctly on the tensioner, and then pull the tensioner way down and pull the belt up onto the idler pulley. Okay, let the tensioner off. Check, make sure, looks like everything's routed correctly. Okay, now I'm going to take my fan shroud, put it down into place carefully. Okay, engine, or the fan is offset this way a little bit, so the smaller side of the shroud goes to that side. Now we'll put the radiator down in. You just need to be careful. Look down in there as you slide it in. A couple things get in the way. There's some hoses and tubes and a wiring harness. And then it slides down in, and there's a couple of tabs that support it. And I'll show you those right here. Tabs that go right into the radiator support area. Okay, now here we're going to put the the fan shroud into place. Just make sure that the fan shroud and radiator, nothing's bound, nothing's caught, no wires or anything are pinched. Then we'll start the 4 bolts into our radiator, as well as the 4 bolts that hold the shroud. The ones that are in the radiator are the 12mm bolts. The shroud is held on by 10mm bolts. And then we'll tighten those up. And again, you want to tighten them firm, but do not over tighten them. Put the passenger side or lower radiator hose in, push it on the engine, use a pair of pliers to put the clamp back in place. Okay, put the upper radiator hose in place, push it down on the engine side first, and then push it onto the radiator. And then again a pair of pliers and put both clamps back into place. Reconnect the overflow tube. And we're going to speed through, put the air duct back on, make sure you tighten up those 2 Phillips screws that hold the big clamps in place, and as well as put the clamp back on that holds the hose to the top of the air duct and your trim or engine identification panel on the top with the 10mm nuts. And make sure we hook our sensor back up. There's a hose that may have come off on the valve cover there. And then down lower, make sure those hoses are back in the clamp and it's securely fastened. Make sure the petcock's tight, connect the lower radiator hose and the transmission cooler hoses, and make sure all the clamps are in place. Okay, now you can rehang your skid plate, and there's 8 bolts that hold it in place. I'll thread those in here and then tighten those up again, tighten them up firm, not extremely tight though. Okay, now refill your radiator directly with either Toyota or a universal coolant. Generally, it's probably going to take 2.5 to 3 gallons. Okay, let's put the radiator cap on. We add a little bit of antifreeze to the reservoir. Reconnect our battery. Okay, so we're running the truck, making sure it's up to operating temperature here. Run a little bit. Check the engine. And obviously what we're checking for is any signs of leaking fluid. But what you want to do, let the engine idle a little bit, make sure it's up at operating temperature, take it for a drive for a while, and then again, check underneath, make sure there's no dripping fluid anywhere, let it cool down, remove the radiator cap, check the level of fluid, and fill it appropriately. We hope this helps you out. Brought to you by www.1aauto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Please feel free to call us toll-free 888-844-3393. We're the company that's here for you on the internet and in person.